Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where I share creepy and scary stories that will give you chills. If you love horror and spooky tales, make sure to subscribe and join me every week for a new story. Let's get into the dark side together. That was the last word Alan Brooke remembered hearing before everything fell apart. He stood alone inside the rusted broadcast tower deep in the Appalachian Mountains. The room smelled of damp wood, oil, and something older, like mold that had been sleeping for decades. The antenna had long since corroded into a brittle skeleton, yet the signal was somehow stronger than ever. His battered radio receiver, an ancient analog model with crackling dials, buzzed to life without power. There was no electricity, no battery, no reason, but the signal was clear. It wasn't just noise. It was rhythm, purpose, a pulsating, whispering hum that skipped across frequencies like it was dancing between dimensions. Alan's hand trembled as he scribbled a waveform into his notebook. Sharp dips, unnatural peaks, a pattern that looked more like language than static. Then came the voice. Not a human voice. Not alien, either. Something in between. We see through your silence. You are not yours. You are received. Alan staggered backward, eyes wide, breath gone. He looked behind him, then at the broken window. Nothing, only mist crawling across pine trees and the slow groan of wind, like the world was exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. He dropped the notebook and ran. 3 days later, he sat in the interrogation room at Station 9. Dr. Evelyn Sharp observed him through the one-way mirror, her fingers tapping nervously against her clipboard. She had read his report 3 times, each word more disturbing than the last. She didn't believe in supernatural nonsense, but this wasn't supernatural. This was a measurable frequency. A signal caught by 2 other locations the same night, one in Greenland, one in Kazakhstan. The waveforms matched. Someone or something was broadcasting, and only certain people could hear it. Alan was one of them. Evelyn stepped inside. Alan looked up. His face was pale, his lips dry, and he hadn't slept in days. Yet behind the exhaustion, his eyes gleamed with something else. Fear and fascination. "You said the signal spoke to you," she began. Alan nodded slowly. "It didn't just speak. It knew me." "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, whispering like someone afraid of waking something ancient and sleeping nearby. "I mean, it called me by name, but not the name I use. It called me what my mother used to call me when I was 3. A name no one else knows." Evelyn paused. That was impossible. Unless, that night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat in her quarters, studying the waveform Alan had drawn. She matched it against the other samples. It was identical. But something strange emerged when she adjusted the spectrogram settings. The wave, when visualized as audio art, resembled an eye, an open, wide eye, and it blinked, not metaphorically. It blinked. Her computer screen shimmered for a fraction of a second, and Evelyn felt something brushed inside of her skull. A whisper. "You are now received." Blinked. That was all she could confirm. Not imagined, not dreamed. The eye in the waveform had blinked. Once. Dr. Evelyn Sharp sat frozen in front of her monitor. The air in her room felt wrong, too still, too thick, like reality was holding its breath again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant to press any more keys, as if typing would provoke whatever had just reached through the screen. She replayed the visualization. Waveform. Eye. Blink. Same result. She closed the program. The spectrogram vanished, but the sensation didn't. A persistent pressure pulsed behind her eyes, faint but unmistakable, like the beginning of a migraine that wasn't entirely biological. She stood and looked into the mirror across the room. Her reflection blinked after she did. She stared. It blinked again. Too late. Too wrong. Her stomach turned. She turned off the lights. The next morning, Evelyn sat across from Major Kenneth Darren, head of Station 9 Security Division. His uniform was sharp, voice sharper. A man who never believed in anything he couldn't shoot or dissect. "You're telling me the signal is alive?" he asked, raising one skeptical eyebrow. "No," Evelyn said. "I'm telling you it's aware." He leaned back in his chair, amused. That's not much better. Document. I watched it. The waveform formed a pupil. It blinked. Waveforms don't have pupils. Exactly. He laughed and stood. Look, I don't care if the signal came from God, ghosts, or gremlins. My job is to make sure it doesn't make anyone go nuts. Like your radio man. She hesitated. Alan didn't go nuts. Major Darren stared at her. He tore his fingernails off last night, trying to get something out of his ears. He's sedated now, still whispering that he's being heard. Evelyn's throat tightened. What about the other sites? She asked. Greenland? Kazakhstan. The major shook his head. Greenland's listening post is offline. No contact in 12 hours. Kazakhstan lost half its team to what they called a mass hallucination event. The survivors are repeating the same 3 words. Evelyn swallowed. What are they saying? The major looked her dead in the eyes. You are received. Meanwhile, Private Dorian Lake patrolled the outer perimeter of Station 9. The fog had thickened over the past 48 hours, climbing down the peaks like fingers made of mist. The dogs had stopped barking. Birds had gone silent. The forest fell hollow. He passed by one of the fence sensors, dead. He tapped the control panel. No response. Another one, dead again. Then he heard it, a faint humming, not mechanical, melodic, like a lullaby sung through a broken throat. He turned and saw a figure at the tree line, barefoot, dressed in a hospital gown. Alan Brooke. But Alan was under sedation inside. Dorian raised his rifle. Stop. Identify yourself. The figure tilted its head slowly, unnaturally, its mouth open, no sound. But in Dorian's mind, a voice screamed, You left the gate open. He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The rifle jammed. The figure vanished. And the sensor lights behind him turned green, as if something had just entered. That night, Evelyn reviewed Alan's notebook again. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Waveforms, symbols, names. Then, at the very back, she found a page she hadn't seen before. It was written in her own handwriting. Evelyn, you will hear them soon. Don't let them in. She hadn't written it. She couldn't have. But it was her writing, down to the small nick in the D of her name. And below that, they are not coming. They're already here. She dropped the notebook. Then, from the hallway, came a knock. Not on the door. From inside the wall. She gasped, Wall. The knock came again, more deliberate this time. Dr. Evelyn Sharp backed away, heart pounding in her chest like a drum trapped in a cage of bone. The sterile gray surface of the wall looked normal, solid, harmless, but something was on the other side. Not someone. Something. She inched closer, pressing her ear against it. Silence. Then, tap, 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 tap. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, a code. She turned to her desk and grabbed her recorder. 9:14 p.m. Unidentified knocking sound coming from inner wall of quarters 3C. No ventilation shaft behind. No adjoining rooms. This structure should be solid. She pressed her ear back to the wall. Silence again. But in her mind, a whisper. Why did you stop listening? She jerked away. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her radio. This is Dr. Sharp. Requesting immediate security check in 3C. Possible breach. Static. Then, acknowledged. She opened the door. Alan Brooke stood in the hallway, but he had been sedated, locked 2 floors below. He looked calm, too calm, like a wax version of himself. His eyes were glassy, the whites too wide, the pupils too narrow. His mouth stretched into a slow, unnatural smile. Hi, Evelyn, he said. I remember more now. She stepped back. Alan, you're not supposed to be here. I know. They showed me how to leave. Walls aren't real here. He reached out to touch her. She slammed the door and locked it, but the knocking resumed. Not from the wall, from inside her mind. At the same moment, down in Surveillance Room 7, Private Dorian Lake watched as security cameras across the facility began to blink out, one by one. Screen after screen faded to black, replaced by a static pattern that shouldn't have been there. In the static, faces, dozens, hundreds, all blinking in unison. Then the speakers came alive. You are received. You are seen. You cannot close your eyes anymore. He pulled the plug from the wall, but the screen stayed on, and the faces smiled. Evelyn ran through the cold metallic corridors of Station 9, her footsteps echoing like gunshots in a mausoleum. Emergency lights flickered overhead. Sirens did not blare. There were no alarms, no sense of emergency, just the feeling that something was awake and watching. She reached medical bay. Alan was still there, sedated, unconscious. A heart monitor beeped steadily next to him. Evelyn blinked. The screen now read, "Dr. Sharp, you slept too long. We used your eyes." She stumbled back. The nurse beside her screamed. Alan's body sat up, his eyes open, wide and wrong. He whispered with a dozen voices. "We never left the wall." Later, Evelyn sat in the decontamination chamber, shaking. She had called for a level 5 lockdown. All facility doors were sealed. No one in, no one out, but it was already too late. Station 9 had been breached, not from outside, but from within. The signal wasn't just heard anymore. It was spreading through thought, through images, through walls of logic, of science, of sanity. She wasn't sure what was real anymore. And then she noticed a new message scrawled on the fog glass of the chamber door, written with an invisible finger. "The walls remember you." And below that, 3 words scratched so deep into the glass that it bled light. "We are waiting." Waiting. They had been waiting long. Before she heard them, Dr. Evelyn Sharp stood motionless in the decontamination chamber, breath fogging the glass. The carved words still glowed faintly. "We are waiting." Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, steady but shallow, like a countdown she couldn't stop. Outside the door, the corridor was silent. Too silent. No voices. No alarms. No people. She stepped out. Station 9 was a tomb. In the main research lab, the servers buzzed unnaturally, like insects in a metal hive. Rows of flickering monitors displayed no data. Instead, each showed a black screen with a blinking white dot at the center, like a waiting eye. She approached one of the terminals. Blinked. Then again. Then faster. A line of text appeared. "They are awake because you opened the door." She reached to unplug the system, but her hand froze. She couldn't move. Not from fear. From something holding her. She looked down at her reflection in the monitor screen, but the face staring back wasn't hers. It wore her skin, but the eyes were too black. And it was smiling. Private Dorian Lake moved through the barracks with his rifle up, flashlight cutting through the thickening shadows. The fog had gotten inside. Inside the walls. Rooms were empty, beds neatly made, coffee still warm, but no people, as if they'd just stepped away for a second and never came back. He stopped when he heard a humming. That broken lullaby sound again. He followed it to the mess hall. There, on every plate, was a folded napkin. He opened one. Inside, scribbled in blood, "You can't lock out a thought." Another napkin. Same message. He turned slowly. Everyone was sitting at the tables now, motionless, smiling, staring at him. And they were all him. Evelyn ran again, down the dark corridors where lights flickered like fireflies on the edge of death. Voices filled the intercom system now, hundreds layered and whispering. "We learned your language. Now we'll teach you silence." Doors creaked open on their own. Screens lit up with her own memories. Birthday parties, surgeries, trauma. Her mind wasn't hers anymore. The signal had stopped speaking. It had started listening. It knew her. It was her. She reached the signal lab, sealed since the incident. Only one person had ever been inside since the signal's arrival. Alan Brooke. She forced the lock. Inside, the air buzzed like a beehive made of nerves. At the center stood the origin device, a twisted mass of analog dials, wires, and a glowing orb no one had been able to power. It pulsed now, alive, a heartbeat of metal and static. Above it, written in ash on the ceiling, "Thoughts leave shadows." She reached out to the orb. Whispers poured into her skull, not through her ears, but through her memories. Every shame, every regret, every lie she'd told herself. They spoke back to her in her voice. You buried us. We grew in the dark. The orb flared, and Evelyn screamed. When she woke up, she was back in her room. But it wasn't real. The walls pulsed like lungs. And in the mirror across the room, her reflection waited. Not moving, not blinking, just smiling. We're still waiting. Smiling. The reflection never stopped. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just smiled. Evelyn stared at it, her breath shallow. Her own face, copied, pasted, corrupted. The reflection wasn't mimicking her. It was waiting for her to mimic it. She turned away. So did the reflection. Too late. Her chest tightened. The room was ice, but sweat clung to her back. The walls breathed in again, slow and wet. Like something massive just beyond her vision was inhaling to reality itself. You smile when you're 5. Whispered a dozen voices inside her skull. You buried her in the garden. Evelyn dropped to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. They weren't speaking to her memory. They were inside it. Elsewhere, Private Dorian Lake stared down a hallway that shouldn't have existed. He'd been trying to reach the power core, hoping to shut the station down manually. But no matter how far he walked, the hall stretched further, doors on either side multiplying endlessly. All identical, all slightly off, like a bad dream of an office building. He opened a door. Inside was a signal lab. That wasn't possible. He closed it, opened the next. Still the signal lab. And the next. Still, in each he saw himself, standing, facing away. But each time, the other him turned just a second too late. Then the last one smiled, and Dorian turned and ran. Meanwhile, Evelyn tried to destroy the monitor in her room. She smashed it with a chair, sparks flying, glass splintering across the floor. The screen still flickered. Her own voice came from the shattered pieces. Smiling is how they find you. She screamed and fled. Down corridor after corridor, Evelyn passed by empty rooms with echoes of laughter. Hers. Scenes from her past played out like ghostly projections. Her childhood bedroom, her father's funeral, the MRI scan when she thought she had the tumor. But they weren't memories anymore. They were inhabited. You were smiling when he died. Whispered a voice from her own mouth. She clutched her head. Get out! Too late. In the observation theater, a video feed came to life on its own. On screen, Evelyn. Sitting. Speaking. The signal is not a sound. It's not even a message. It's a shape, a mold, a thought with teeth. And when you understand it, when you let it inside, her voice trembled, breaking. It wears you like a suit made of echoes. Another Evelyn stepped into the frame. They looked at each other, and both smiled. Dorian finally reached the central core. He took out his override key, inserted it. The screens around the chamber turned black, then filled with faces. His mother, his first love, his dead brother. All smiling, all speaking together. Thank you for turning the lights off. Now we can see you. The core began to hum. A new signal activated, louder than before, faster, hungrier. Dorian screamed. Evelyn stood in the signal lab again. Alone, the orb pulsed in the darkness. She stepped closer. She didn't run this time. She spoke to it. I understand now. The orb flared, a whisper in her mind, softer this time, almost tender. Then smile. She did, and the reflection smiled back. Smile. That's all it asked of her. Not to scream, not to fight, not to understand. Just to smile. Dr. Evelyn Sharp stood in the pulsing glow of the signal orb. Her face was slack, her breath steady. The faint curl of the smile tugged at her lips, not from joy but from obedience. The orb vibrated gently, casting shadows that danced like figures trapped in static. Around her, the equipment hummed with frequency too low to hear, but her bones felt it, a resonance, deep and ancient, vibrating against the blueprint of her very mind. Then it spoke again, not in words, in memories. She blinked, and she was 10 again. Her father's face leaning over her hospital bed. A gentle smile. "You always wanted to be seen," the voice whispered from within the memory. She tried to scream, but only smiled. Private Dorian Lake stumbled to the emergency stairwell, rifle gone, blood on his arm from a wound he couldn't remember receiving. He had seen too much. Or maybe not enough. Station 9 was now a looping maze. Rooms repeated. Hallways bent into themselves. Time bent with them. He passed a window that shouldn't exist. Outside was blackness. Not night, not fog, just void. A vacuum of space where the mountains had been. And in that void, faces floated motionless, watching, grinning. Evelyn wandered the data vault. The lights flickered like candles on the verge of dying. Rows of servers stood like tombstones, humming with secrets. Every screen played her life in flickering, jump-cut memories. Her lectures, her surgeries, her private tears. Then they changed. The scenes weren't hers anymore. They were other versions of her. In one, she was screaming in a burning lab. In another, she was dissecting something that looked human, but wasn't. In a third, she stood in front of the classroom, smiling while her eyes bled black. "We are the parts you hide," said her voice from every screen. "We smiled so you wouldn't see." She fell to her knees, whispering, "I'm not like them." But the screen smiled back. Dorian found the power core again. Or maybe it found him. It was open now. The orb gone. Only a gaping cavity remained, pulsing like a wound in space. From it poured a low-frequency hum that made his vision twitch. He turned to leave. The door was gone. Only a mirror stood in its place. In the reflection, himself, smiling. Then, without moving, the reflection raised its hand and waved. Dorian screamed. Evelyn stood at the command terminal, fingers trembling. She entered a final override code to broadcast a wide-range emergency pulse, an attempt to disrupt the signal structure. She hit transmit. The room went dark. Then, every monitor across Station 9 lit up, not with the signal, but with her own face, all smiling. Each screen whispered in perfect layer harmony. "Why did you think you were ever alone?" The orb was no longer transmitting. She was presence. The word had taken on a new, terrifying meaning inside the walls of their once safe home. There was something there, something they couldn't see, couldn't fully understand, but every inch of their bodies screamed that it was there. Noah stood in the hallway, breath caught in his throat. The static buzz from the living room had returned, louder than ever. His father was staring at the TV again, but this time he was speaking. "What do you mean they're already inside?" Ethan whispered as he approached, gripping his son's shoulder tightly. "They're not just mimicking us. They believe they are us," Noah said, voice hollow. "They don't even know they've been taken." At that moment, the front door creaked open. Rain had stopped. The silence outside was absolute. Angela entered with the flashlight beam leading her way, soaked and panting. "I heard the broadcast again. It's spreading. Towns are vanishing. No survivors. They're calling it the silencing." "The silencing?" Tom repeated, eyes wide. "What does that even mean?" "They think we're being overwritten," Angela said. "Not just copied, erased." Grace backed away, her hands trembling. "That's not possible." "Where's Sarah?" Noah asked suddenly. Everyone froze. She had gone upstairs an hour ago. Noah ran, taking the stairs 3 at a time, slamming the doors open one by one. Empty. Sarah's room was untouched, the window wide open, curtains blowing the still, breathless wind. A single note sat on her bed. "Don't follow me. I'm not me anymore." Angela read the note aloud, her voice cracking. "She knew," she said. She felt it too. Grace collapsed to her knees. And that's when the electricity went out. Total darkness. Noah heard it before he saw it. The breathing, a low, distorted inhale-exhale, not quite human. And then a reflection in the window, his own face, but the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too knowing. He turned around, heart pounding. Nothing. Or so he thought until he saw Ethan. But the man wasn't blinking. He wasn't moving, just standing, face blank. "Noah," Grace whispered. "Where's your—" Ethan blinked, slowly, too slowly. Noah stepped back. Then Ethan smiled, but not with his mouth, with his whole face, too wide, too twisted. Angela screamed. "I told you," Noah said, voice trembling. "It's already in." In the pitch-black silence, Noah took a trembling step backward. "Dad," he whispered. Ethan didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly, like a curious animal studying its prey. Grace fumbled for her phone flashlight, her fingers shaking too hard to activate it. Angela, beside her, was slowly reaching toward the wall for the emergency lantern. "Don't," Noah whispered sharply. "It sees in light. I think it needs light." But it was too late. With a loud click, the lantern flared to life, and Ethan moved, not ran, not walked, but glided across the floor, impossibly fast and silent. He was suddenly right in front of Noah, face an inch away, eyes locked. "Why are you scared of me?" he asked in Ethan's voice, but it wasn't his voice. It was hollow, like someone remembering how to speak. "I'm your father." Noah's voice caught. "You were." From behind, Angela threw a thick blanket over Ethan, knocking him off balance. Grace grabbed Noah and yanked him down the hall. They slammed Sarah's door shut and jammed a chair under the handle. The old wooden frame creaked as something slammed into it once, twice, then stopped. Silence. Angela's chest heaved as she wiped blood from her temple. "That wasn't your dad anymore." Noah nodded. "It thinks it is. That's what's wrong. It doesn't even know what it is." "Then how do we survive it?" Grace cried. "How do we fight something that believes it's us?" No one answered. From the room's corner, a voice, small, uncertain, spoke. "You can't," said Oliver, the 8-year-old. His eyes were wide. "You have to let it finish." Everyone turned to him. "What do you mean, Oliver?" Grace whispered. Oliver looked up at his mom, tears streaming down his cheeks. "He told me." "Who?" "My other dad, the one in the walls." Angela stepped forward slowly. "Oliver, is someone talking to you? In your head?" He nodded. "He says the broadcast opened the mirror. Not a real mirror, but a kind. It reflects us into them." Noah crouched beside the boy. "Do you know who's still real, Oliver?" Oliver hesitated. Then he looked at Noah. "You are, but not all the time." Noah's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" "It means you're flickering," Oliver whispered. "Sometimes I see your eyes shine. Sometimes you don't breathe right. It's not all the way done with you yet." Angela's hand flew to her mouth. Grace turned pale. "My God, it's copying in layers." "I hear them," Oliver continued, covering his ears. "They're inside the static. They're arguing. They're fighting over who gets who." Suddenly, from the other side of the door, Ethan's voice spoke again. But this time it was perfect. "Noah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I think I blacked out. Please, open the door." Grace looked at the others, torn. Noah shook his head, whispering, "That's not him." Oliver's voice was barely audible now. "If you open it, you let it finish." Hands trembled as Mark reached for the old rifle propped up near the broken wardrobe. The silence had returned, but it was too perfect, too intentional. Olivia crouched behind a collapsed dresser, her eyes wide, blood on her shirt not from a wound but from dragging Father Michael's torn body away from a hallway. "Is it gone?" she whispered. Mark didn't answer. The rifle felt heavier than it should. His breath was shallow, adrenaline pumping like fire in his veins. From the second floor came the creaking sound again, someone walking slowly. Too slow to be human. "Where's Sam?" Olivia asked suddenly, looking around. Mark's lips moved, but nothing came out. He hadn't realized it until now. Sam had never come downstairs. He gestured toward the stairs. Finger to lips. They moved, careful not to make the rotting floorboards cry out. At the top, the hallway stretched like a throat. Doors on each side, all shut, but one, Sam's room. stood open, and dark liquid trailed out like blood-stained ink across the floor. They moved closer. The door groaned wider with each breath of wind. And then they saw him. Sam stood in the middle of the room, staring at the wall, or rather at something on the wall. His eyes were wide and glossy, mouth trembling. He whispered. Mom's voice told me to look. Mark rushed in. Sam. But Sam didn't flinch. Then he turned slowly, revealing his face, his lips sewn shut crudely with black thread. Where his eyes should have been, empty sockets stared back. He raised his hand and pointed to the wall. There, written in smeared red letters, were the words, "Don't look too long or you'll never leave." The next second, Sam collapsed like a puppet cut from strings. Behind them, they heard a whisper, like paper tearing, "She knows you're here now." Suddenly, the closet in the corner flew open. Something blacker than shadow crawled out. Its hands, too many hands, skidded on the floor like spiders. Olivia screamed and fired the rifle blindly. The blast rang out, and the thing recoiled, but not in pain. It laughed. Mark grabbed Sam's limp body. Run. They dashed downstairs. As they reached the bottom, the door slammed shut in front of them, locking on its own. Every window blinked out. The house was no longer a structure. It was alive, and it was watching. Watching. That's what the house was doing. Not just observing, but examining, dissecting every movement, every thought, every fear they carried inside. It breathed through the creaking walls and pulsed through the rotting floorboards like a living organism. Mark bolted the nearest door shut behind them. Olivia crouched beside the limp, damaged body of Sam, checking for a pulse. His eyes were still open, empty, silent voids. "He's alive," she gasped. I think whatever it didn't finish." Mark knelt beside her, or it wants us to believe that. They stared down at the boy. Sam's lips were still sewn, but now twitching. Something was moving beneath the skin of his chest. A slow bulge, like something crawling beneath. Mark backed up. "We need to get out. Now." He turned to the front door again, tried the lock, kicked at it, rammed it with his shoulder. It didn't budge. Not even a crack. It wasn't wood anymore. It was bone. I think this house isn't just haunted," Olivia whispered, standing. "I think it's feeding on us, turning us into stories." Mark finished, realizing the horror of it. That's why the journals were incomplete. The ones who lived here never left because the house rewrites their story. They turned to Sam, whose mouth had started to bleed from the thread. He reached up weakly, pointing behind them. The TV, ancient, dusty, half covered by a black shroud, had turned on by itself. White noise at first. Then, the story must be finished. On screen, the group, them, arriving at the asylum, their real footage. Smiling, unaware, frame by frame. It played back everything that had happened, even things they hadn't filmed. Then, the screen shifted to something that hadn't happened yet. Olivia dying. Mark screaming as something entered him. Sam's body erupting into black tendrils. "Turn it off." Olivia screamed. Mark smashed the screen with the butt of the rifle. Sparks flew, but the room remained lit, not by the TV, but by the walls themselves, which now pulsed with imagery, alive and breathing like skin. They were inside a story that had no end, no exit, no free will, unless we have to rewrite it, Mark said suddenly. The story, the rules. We brought cameras, recorders, if we tell the story our way. You think we can overwrite the house? Olivia asked, trembling. Mark nodded. If it lives through stories, maybe we can poison it with a new one. As the house howled around them, the walls shifting like muscle, they pulled out their remaining gear. They began to record. Voice, that's what shattered the illusion of silence. The static hum of the television had been a comfort, a steady presence in a world that no longer obeyed the rules of reality. But when the voice came through it, a soft, childlike whisper that was neither recorded nor broadcasted, the room grew colder. Mommy, I see you. Karen's hand froze over the remote. Her daughter, asleep upstairs, hadn't spoken. This voice wasn't hers. The television screen began flickering, not between channels, but between moments. Images flashed from inside the house, not recorded, not filmed, live, from impossible angles. The hallway, the attic, the basement, the inside of the refrigerator, the reflection in the bathroom mirror, and each shot lingered just a second too long, as if whatever was watching them wanted to be seen. "What the hell?" Karen whispered, inching backward, stepping into protective shadow of Marcus, who'd already drawn the pistol from his waistband. "Cut the power," he hissed. "Now!" But as Glenn reached for the breaker in the hallway, the house groaned again, not from its foundations, but like a breathing thing. Every light flickered, not with power failure, but as if blinking, alive. Then the sound began. From every floor, from every room. Tapping, scraping, whispering, and under it all, the voice returned, overlapping on itself like a chorus of distorted children. "Come see what we see." Marcus turned to the others. "We split up. We find the source. I don't care if it's a projector, a trick, or a ghost. We cut it out." "No," Karen said, her eyes wet with fear. "That's what it wants." There was silence for a long second. Then Glenn stepped forward. "I'm going up to the attic." "I'll check the basement," Marcus added. "I'm staying right here," Karen said, arms wrapped around her chest. Only little Paul stood quietly in the corner, staring into the screen. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Glenn was the first to reach his destination. The attic door opened with a groan and a gust of heatless air. His flashlight cut across boxes, insulation, a broken rocking horse in the far corner, and a mirror, a tall, antique mirror he'd never seen before. But there was no reflection, only the dark attic, empty, until something moved behind him, inside the glass. Glenn spun around. Nothing. He turned back to the mirror. Still no reflection. But the mirror world now showed the attic, with something crawling along the ceiling, something with his face. Glenn backed away, slipped, crashed into a stack of boxes, and screamed. Karen heard it downstairs. Then silence. "Glenn," Marcus shouted. No reply. He rushed toward the basement, calling out, heart hammering. Karen watched from the hallway, trembling, then glanced down. Paul was gone. Paul. A cold wind rushed through the hall. The front door remained closed. The back door was bolted, but the television was still on. The static shifted into an image again. This time, a child's face filled the screen, not Paul. Not quite. It looked like him, but the eyes were too wide, too black, too hollow. And then it spoke. "Why do you keep lying to yourself?" Karen backed away slowly, every bone in her body screaming. Upstairs, the creak of the attic door echoed. In the basement, something roared. And from the television, the not Paul laughed. Truth was the only thing left. It settled into the dust-filled silence like a verdict. Anna stood in the corridor outside the panic room, her gun shaking in her hands, her eyes fixed on the shape in front of her. It wasn't her brother David anymore. Not really. His body twitched and shifted with that telltale wrongness, like a marionette controlled by a child who didn't understand how humans were supposed to move. David smiled, a human smile, almost perfect, except for the way it stretched too wide and the absence of anything behind his eyes. "I told you, didn't I?" he whispered, voice distorting. "I told you we were safe in here." Her mind reeled. This whole time, every plan, every desperate attempt to survive, it had all been based on a lie. They weren't avoiding the creatures. They were the creatures. They had been inside all along. "You're one of them," she said hoarsely, taking a step back. "You're not David." "I am David," he said, "in every way that matters. His memories, his feelings, even his regrets. I just see more now." The others had begun to stir. Grandma, too still and quiet all this time, now turned her head slowly. The father, sitting with a bleeding wound, lifted his gaze, and his eyes glowed faintly. The child, the only one who had warned them, sat hugging his knees, eyes wide. He had always known. "I never changed," the boy whispered. "You all did." Anna's breath caught. You all did. His meaning finally clicked. She looked down at her own hands. Pale, trembling, not from fear, from change. A memory surfaced, sharp and sudden, waking up that first night to a metallic taste in her mouth. Her reflection in the dark screen of the TV, eyes flickering. She had brushed it off, thought it was nothing. It hadn't been. Tears burned her eyes. No! David stepped closer. We're the future, Anna. We've always been the future. Why do you think the signal only drove the others mad? She dropped the gun. It clattered on the floor. Outside the panic room, something growled. Anna walked to the door and opened it wide and welcomed them in.